help out with the mission to Mars. Our last speaker is Isabel Moreno. She is a physicist, a meteorologist, expert in the atmosphere. She has often appeared on different television programs, and she's a presenter on Spanish television as well, and she has written a book which is called Climate Change for Beginners. So, a warm round of applause please for Isabel Moreno. Thank you very much. Hey, how are you all? Do you want to fancy going on a trip? Come on, let's go on a trip. Here we are, this is a great car. You know which car it is, right? Yeah, it's the, that's from Back to the Future. So, we're going to go back to the past. We're going to go back to the time of the dinosaurs. 200 million years ago, more or less, there were all the dinosaurs living here on the Earth. Now, if dinosaurs were to be alive today, they'd be really cold because the Earth was much hotter back then. But we know what happened to the dinosaurs, right? We all know. Big meteorite came down and that was the end of the dinosaurs. So, with the DeLorean, we can go to another moment in history. Maybe 27,000 years ago, we can go to Marseille, to a cave, and there we will find that they're busy painting the walls. Now, what on earth is this? What does it look like? It looks like a penguin, right? Do you know the funniest thing about it? It's not that they were painting penguins at that time in France, or what is now France. It's the fact that in order to see that penguin today, we'll have to actually go down 36 meters. Because at that time, the sea level was actually 120 meters below what it is today. But then the temperature started to go up. There was a much more stable climate, more even temperatures, which enabled civilizations to develop. Egypt, Mesopotamia, etc. And with our DeLorean, we can then come back to the mid-19th century with the Industrial Revolution. And something which could be quite curious for those of you who don't know much about this, and it was because at this moment in time, right in the middle of the 19th century, we had the first studies that told us that the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere was linked to the temperature of the atmosphere. The first study was published by a woman, 2 years later by a man, but we didn't know whether Tyndall knew the studies which had been published previously by Foote. So we don't know. But this isn't all. At the end of the 19th century, we had the first calculation about how the temperature on the planet would change depending on the concentrations of CO2 on the planet or in the atmosphere. Now, this is a paper which was studying glaciation, or the glacial era, the glaciation. It was published by someone called Arrhenius. And they know that the carbon that is being used to obtain energy, so we're burning coal in order to get energy, and that's releasing CO2, and they realized, or they thought that at the time, this could be compensated by the climate system. That was way back when. That was in 1896. Now we know that things aren't quite like that. We know that the quantities of CO2 in the atmosphere has been increasing constantly, and now the climate system is not able to compensate for all of it. And the most serious thing about all of this is not just the quantity of CO2 that we have in the atmosphere, but the rate at which it has been produced. And moreover, never before in the history of humankind have we seen such high concentrations of CO2. We know that those scientists were right when they said in the middle of the 19th century that the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere was linked to temperature, and that precisely this concentration of greenhouse gas gases that we're seeing now are the reason why the temperature is going up. And moreover, we've actually put ourselves a limit at the end of this century, 1.5 degrees. We're talking about 1.5 degrees centigrade, but I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later. But we're going on our fictitious journey with the DeLorean. We've been to the past so far, but let's just go to another world now, a lovely, fantastic world full of rainbows and all sorts of lovely things. Imagine that we stop emitting CO2 right now, just right now, what would happen? The concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere would not actually go down over the next years and the coming years and more and more and more. We'd have to wait centuries to see how that amount of CO2 in the atmosphere goes down. And of course, the temperatures aren't going to go down in any great degree either, because this isn't the world isn't full of rainbows. So the longer we take to stop emitting CO2 into the atmosphere, the longer it will take to take them out of our atmosphere, and the longer it will take for the temperatures to go down. Now, somebody might be saying, okay, Isabel, what are you talking about? Okay, we're going to stop emitting right now, because I know that if we plant trees are going to get CO2 from the atmosphere, and it's going to sequester carbon, and it's going to be there in the leaves, in the ground. That's what somebody might be saying. And yes, planting trees might be a good solution because they've got climatic benefits. We can involve local communities and create a social benefit. And also, it's also beneficial in terms of biodiversity, but only if we do it properly. Because here we might say, okay, you convinced me. I'm going to leave this theatre and go and plant some trees. But if we don't know what we're doing, then we could in fact be introducing invasive species without meaning to. We could be degrading the soil, and trees can only absorb so much CO2. They can't absorb all the CO2 that we are dumping into the atmosphere. Now, somebody else might be saying, okay, Isabel, don't worry, because now we've got fantastic technology. There are factories that get the CO2, they break it down, and they, turn it into something else that we can put in the ocean, in the ground, and all the rest of it. Now, this does exist, yes, and we hope that it will exist in the future at the scale we need, because at the moment it's not up to scratch. It's not enough to compensate all the CO2 that we're emitting into the atmosphere at the moment, and that we are not able to sequester or retain. So we need a lot more research, but as I told you just a couple of seconds ago, we hope that hopefully in a few years this will be available. But what would happen? What will happen if this were to become available? Let's go back to that lovely ideal world of rainbows, and let's just imagine that we're actually removing CO2. We're talking about 500 parts per million. Maybe it's, 550, who knows. But if we take that CO2 out of the atmosphere, temperatures would still take a few years to calm down. There would be a bit of a lag, and maybe after 10 years, we would be able to see that the line would eventually start going down. There's another example. What happened with permafrost? That frozen surface which exists at the poles, which is melting because of the rise in temperatures. And even if we took CO2 out of the way, the permafrost wouldn't realise anything had changed for years to come. But there's something that wouldn't realise for decades and centuries, and that's the ocean. The sea levels will continue to rise no matter what we do. Ah, great. No, I bet you're all feeling really depressed now. And I'm sure you're all thinking to yourself, well, what's the point of doing anything if the sea levels are going to continue to rise no matter what we do? So I use this simile. If one of the rooms in your house is burning, what are you going to do? You try to, put the fire out to make sure that it doesn't spread throughout the rest of the house? Or will you just sit there in your armchair seeing how your house burns down around you? You try to put the fire out, right? Is it better for one room to burn down, or to have the whole house burn down? What's better? Is it better for sea levels to rise just a few centimetres or metres over the next few years? So you could say, okay, right, let's get the best scenario. We're going to limit as much as possible the amount of CO2. But what would happen if we actually exceeded the goal set by the Paris Agreement? As we've seen, the climate system is incredibly complicated, much more complicated than it may appear at first glance. Every step that we take is a step that it's very hard to go back on. If we go up for 2 degrees over the temperature in the pre-industrial era, there are areas that are going to disappear forever. Parts of the Antarctic will disappear. If we go up over 4 degrees, there'll be other things that will be very, very difficult to do. We won't be able to turn back the clocks. So if we're looking at the future, we can get back into the DeLorean, and I'm going to ask you the next question, because what what were the people in Back to the Future most scared of? Marty's parents never getting to know each other, no? Never getting together. So why don't we alter the present to change the future? If altering the past can change the present, why don't we change the present to alter the future? We need to decide whether we want a utopian future or a dystopian future, and which we don't know what the consequences will be. But we've written this story. We've got into the DeLorean. We've seen the consequences of everything we've done so far, but what's in front of us is still a blank page. The story has yet to be written, but it will be determined by the decisions that we are making today. But the pages are still blank, and the end has yet to be written. So let's try and write the best possible ending to the story.